Hi, SpinSheet sailors. This is Beth Crabtree with SpinSheet Magazine and Start Sailing Now. And I'm here today with Lori Underwood, who is being profiled in our March edition of SpinSheet. Lori, welcome.
Glad to be here.
You guys got into sailing because you bought weekend sailing lessons for your husband, thinking that, oh, I'll get back into power boating. And now it turns out you're really into sailing.
Yep, I love it. But yeah, my motivation in getting my husband sailing lessons for his birthday is he always said, oh, my dream would be to, charter a sailboat and cruise around the Bahamas. But he'd never really been on any boats other than a big cruise ship. So we had the grandparents in town for a weekend watching the kids. So I was like, let's just go do a weekend of sailing lessons. I couldn't have imagined, 5 years later, that I own a sailboat and cruise all over the place on the bay, and would love to cruise lots more places.
So Lori and her husband own a hunter sailboat, and they do quite a bit of cruising on the Chesapeake Bay. Tell us a little bit about your adventures.
Well, it's just amazing. I feel like we could spend decades cruising around the bay and not go everywhere, but we want to go everywhere and see everything. So back in 2019, we did a spring break trip where we're limited to school and work vacations, down to Tangier Island and Crisfield and Reedville. Later in the summer, we went all the way up to Wildwood, New Jersey, going through the C&D Canal and stopping at several ports along the way or on the way back, including Baltimore and Fairleigh Creek. But the C&D Canal was great. I loved it. It was just something very different. You motor through the whole canal. The currents definitely matter, and that was kind of interesting because you could be going 4 knots with a current against you, and 8.5 knots with the current behind you. It's a ton of bridges, but they're all fixed bridges except one, and they have plenty of clearance. It was just fascinating that it's this man-made body of water that connects the bay to the ocean. And so I really loved exploring that. And it was different. The landscape looked different than the bay.
Yeah, that's great. Now, what was the Southern Bay like? I mean, it gets really wide down there compared to the Northern Bay. How did that feel?
It was really interesting, but it was very different. The radio traffic was really different, and it was fascinating because I'm so used to being up in the Middle Bay, and on the weekend you could hear someone say, "Oh, nice wake," or people like the kind of chatter back and forth on the radio, and somebody's always hailing somebody. It was pretty quiet, and there was a lot of military traffic. So it was fascinating to hear about having to clear an area around a submarine coming through. Unfortunately, when we were in Yorktown going over to Cape Charles, we were a little north of where the subs were coming in from Hampton, but you could hear all that traffic. And so it was just very different than the usual chatter we're used to. That's recreational and fishing boats. It was really mainly military, hearing about boats going out to sea, clearing the areas around the submarines. So it was definitely very interesting. And the bay itself was empty. Like, we felt like we were the only boat out there, which was also unusual.
That's awesome. So I guess in closing, let's I know you're really active with your Hunter Sailing Club. Can you just explain for people who are just buying a boat or just getting into sailing the benefits of your club? Because I know that you put a lot into it, but I know you get a lot out of that club.
Absolutely. When we first got our boat, we had sailed, 19-foot Flying Scots with no engines, and occasionally chartered a larger boat, but didn't have a lot of experience. And the first time we got on our boat, my reaction was like, oh my God, what did we do? This is so big. How am I going to dock it? How am I going to do these things? And the folks in our sailing club really reached out and said, everyone's like that when they first get their boat. You got this, you know what you're doing. We've also had a lot of maintenance questions come up, and having a group of friends that also have hunter sailboats, they're really familiar with it and kind of walked us through some maintenance and things like that. But the main thing is it's the friendships. I think when my husband and I bought our boat, we knew we loved sailing and we loved the idea of going different places. But what we didn't really anticipate was the really good friends that we would make. And I love that, the sailing club is so diverse. There are people that I might not meet in regular walks of life with my job or my husband's job that have become really close friends. And to have people who share your love of sailing and getting out on the water and going places and planning adventures together. It just has really enhanced the entire boating experience for me.
That's wonderful to hear. Well, Lori, thanks so much for sharing a little bit about your sailing, and we hope it inspires others to get out there and start sailing now.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.